It's summertime, and if you're a health nut like me, that means one thing: farmers markets. I hit up the stands downtown at the city market, at fairgrounds, and in the parking lots of high schools and churches. The early season brings ramps. The later season yields corn and watermelon. And in my part of the country, peaches are the belle of the ball. So when I'm going through the rows and rows of produce booths, I'm always most selective when it comes to the fuzzy orange fruit. I was in the parking lot of a Methodist church browsing. There were homemade cheeses and meats. The Amish brought in freshly baked breads. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched with each lap around the market I made. I was, in fact, being watched. Behind a stand stood a man in black slacks and a red button-up shirt, and the sign above his head advertised that he sold the juiciest peaches in the state. That is a claim that many make, and few live up to. Maybe he could spot me for what I was, a produce snob. Each time I glanced over my shoulder, I saw his gaze fixated on me. Other customers came and went from his booth, and even as they asked questions or handed him money, half his attention was always locked on me. It was giving me the creeps. Finally, I stopped at his stand. His calm smile widened as I neared. He pushed a green crate across the counter just as I arrived, and there were a dozen fat peaches stacked in it. $5 was the cost, he told me. I forked over a 5-spot and made room in my reusable bag for the peaches. The transaction was surprisingly normal, despite the fact that he had been eye-boning me for the last 20 minutes. The man at the booth promised me that they would be the greatest peaches that I ever tasted, and then he gave me that big, toothy grin, and I couldn't help but shudder. That night after dinner, I had a hankering for something sweet. I remembered that I had the dozen peaches and took one from the bowl on the counter. The very first bite delivered on the booth's promise. It was the crispest, sweetest fruit I'd ever put in my mouth. My taste buds sang. The peach's juices dribbled over my lower lip. I cut away a chunk from my Chihuahua Dickens, and he happily scarfed it down. I couldn't stop eating it, and within minutes, I had stripped the fruit down nearly to the pit. But then on my last bite, something was awry. Peaches have hard, wrinkly pits, but this one felt all wrong when my teeth grazed across it. Confused, I pressed my thumbs into what was left of the meat of the fruit and peeled back. The color must have drained from my face at the sight. A skull. A tiny, white skull. I spit out the mouthful of peach I still had to chew, and rushed to the sink. Peeling back the fruit's flesh, I ran it under the tap to reveal more. There were 2 eye sockets dripping with peach nectar, and a beak. It looked like a hummingbird's skull. I began to panic. The taste of vomit stung my throat. I yanked the bowl of fruit to me and grabbed a paring knife from the cutlery block. Dickens stared up at me, his head cocked to the side in confusion. One at a time, I split through the peaches. Each time I got to the center, I uncovered another tiny bird's skull instead of a pit. I made a pile of them in the basin of the sink, and by the time I had cut open all 12 peaches, I had a small avian graveyard among my dishes. What the fuck? What the actual fuck? I thought. I gathered them all up and chucked them in the garbage. The next morning, The first thing on my list was to haul ass down to the farmer's market and confront the psychopath that had sold me tainted fruit. When I pulled up, I spotted his booth right where it had been the day before. The man in the red shirt smiled and waved even before I could put my car in park. I climbed out, slammed the door shut, and marched straight for him. "What the hell did you sell me?" I shouted at him. Heads turned. People stopped their shopping and eavesdropped. "I have no idea what you're talking about, sir," the man in the red shirt said. "Those peaches," I said. I shoved my finger right in his face. It didn't faze him. "They were full of fucking bones." "Bones?" he asked. "Yes, tiny little skulls. From animals. Fucking bones, man." A small crowd was gathering, and people were gasping into their palms. I couldn't tell if they were disgusted by my claim, or if they thought I was a nut. "I assure you, there's nothing wrong with my produce, sir," the man said. His eerie smile was calm and collected. He didn't seem upset in the least. "Bullshit." He gestured towards the table of assorted fruit in front of him. He reached down for his pocket and pulled out a folding knife. Offering it to me, he said, "Cut open anything you'd like. I swear, I haven't a clue what you're getting at. Check? Check?" I took the knife from him and turned towards the crowd, holding the blade up as if I were an actor on stage. I told everyone to watch as I grabbed the nearest peach. The knife blade drove down into the juicy flesh, and I pulled the peach apart. There, in the center, was a wrinkled brown pit. "See?" the man said. No. I swear to God, every last peach I cut up last night had a goddamn bird skull in the center. I apologize that you didn't like them, but I promise there was no animal bones in my fruit. The man took the wet knife from my hand and wiped it off on his slacks. He lifted his hands in defense, but as a gesture of goodwill. "Please, take something on the house." He clipped the folding knife back to his belt and reached over to grab a case of 4 avocados. "These are perfectly ripe. Give them a squeeze. I promise you'll like them." I was awestruck by the failure of my demonstration. People were going back to their shopping and muttering under their breath that I was crazy or that I was fishing for a discount. My face was red with a mixture of embarrassment and frustration. I eyed the man in the red shirt, swiped the avocados off the counter, and stormed back out to the parking lot. I rushed home. Dumping the avocados out on the kitchen table, I grabbed my paring knife and sat down. Dickens barked and tried to climb up my leg. I reached down and swatted him aside. There was business to attend to. I sliced open the leathery green skin of the first. The silky meat of the avocado inside was soft. The smell of fresh avocado filled my kitchen. I cut straight down to the center. But where there should have been a brown sphere, my knife's blade instead nicked into something much harder. "No," I whispered. A mouse's skull grinned up at me, buried in soft green flesh. "That fucking psycho!" I cried. I grabbed the next avocado and cut, and the next, and the next. 4 avocados cleaved on my kitchen table, and 4 mouse skulls piled next to them. My blood boiled. My heart pounded. There was a lump the size of a fist in my throat. I wasn't sure whether to be terrified or enraged. staring down at the 4 mouse skulls cradled in my green goop slathered hands. I just started to weep. What did it mean? What was that bastard trying to do? How on earth did he manage to insert animal remains inside of otherwise pristine produce? What sick pleasure did he get from tormenting me? Day 3. I was up at the crack of dawn, and prepared to slam down a bag of animal skulls on that sick fuck's fruit stand. I tore down the road to the farmer's market, and pulled into the parking lot right as it opened. But something was wrong. The man in the red shirt was nowhere to be seen. His booth was gone. An empty square of yellow grass sat in its place. I asked about the neighboring booths, but they just shrugged me off, remembering me only as the lunatic that ran around falsely accusing people the day before. Defeated, I got back in my car and drove home. When I got home, I sat at the kitchen table and held my head in my hands. 1,000 questions swarmed in my mind. Why me? Why at all? Just why? After a few minutes, I sighed and told myself I should move on. The booth was gone. The fruit and the skulls were gone. I had a strange new story to tell friends, though I doubted anyone would believe me. I grabbed Dickon's leash off of the counter and called for him. Maybe a walk would help me clear my mind. But my little chihuahua didn't come running. I whistled for him again. Nothing. Maybe I had left him in the backyard when I left for the morning. I went out through the garage to the back door. The yard was empty, but there was a basket on the back porch. In the basket sat a watermelon. My heart sank at the sight. Had the man in the red shirt followed me home? Was he stalking me? For the millionth time that week, my mind screamed, what did it all mean? Was he still here? Did he kidnap my dog? There was a note, taped to the rind. Open the watermelon.